Good evening, my dark hearts. You've wandered into my shadows. Again. But I have to warn you, this tale is dangerous. Most won't make it to the end. They'll flinch, they'll look away when the dark presses too close. But not you. You'll stay with me because you want to know what waits for you in the black. So breathe deep, darling, and remember where you are. This is Shadows and Wonder. The days in Greymouth blurred together under a sky that never seemed to clear. Mornings smelled faintly of brine and rust, and the narrow streets were lined with shop windows clouded by years of salt air. Claire hadn't planned to come to Greymouth, but after her mother's death, the only family she had left was an aunt she barely remembered. A woman who owned an old doll shop on Harrow Street. The upstairs apartment was small and cold, but it was hers. And for the first time, she thought she might finally have somewhere to belong. Claire spent her first week in the Seamstress Children, dusting shelves that hadn't been touched in months. The dolls stared from every direction, pale cheeks, rosebud lips, each pair of glass eyes painted so precisely it was impossible to look away without the faint sense they'd follow. One afternoon, pushing an old display aside, she found a locked glass case tucked into the shadows of a back wall. The label, written in her aunt's neat script, read, "Unfinished." Inside sat 6 incomplete dolls, some without eyes, some missing limbs, their bisque skin raw at the edges where work had stopped mid-creation. Dust lay thick across the shelves, except for one, where a doll's head faced just slightly off from the others, as if it had been turned. That night, Claire woke to the faint creak of a floorboard near her bed. Her pulse hammered. Moonlight spilled across her nightstand, and there it sat, one of the unfinished dolls, wearing a tiny jacket of deep blue corduroy she'd never seen before. She forced herself to touch it to prove it was just porcelain, cold, still, but she couldn't remember bringing it upstairs. The next day, she carried the doll back to its case and tried to lose herself in reorganizing the shop. That's when she saw it, an older doll tucked into the far corner, away from the rest. Its likeness was unmistakable, the Undertaker from Greymouth Cemetery, captured in miniature. Every wrinkle at the corner of his eyes, the slope of his shoulders, the creased black cap he always wore. She'd passed him in town only yesterday, his gait slow and mechanical among the gravestones. Yet the doll's face was younger. Later that evening, rain misted against her coat as she took the long way home past the cemetery gates. A shadow moved between the rows, the Undertaker shoveling earth in a steady rhythm, his head lifting just enough for the lamplight to catch his eyes. The reflection was too sharp, too glassy, and the sight made her fingers ache to drop the umbrella. The following morning, the sisters next door arrived with warm bread wrapped in linen, their shawls neat, their smiles stretched just a little too wide. The bread smelled sweet, too sweet, like sugar masking something sour beneath. One sister leaned too close to the window display, her eyes flicking not at Claire, but at the dolls. "Have you picked a favorite yet?" she asked, voice lilting like a nursery rhyme. She smiled directly at a porcelain child with cracked lips, as though expecting it to answer. "They can be fussy until they get used to you," the other added, setting the loaf on the counter with hands that lingered just a second too long on the wood. Her voice was syrup thick, the kind that sticks in your throat. Claire forced a thank you, but couldn't shake the sense that the bread was an offering, not a gift. That week, a tourist disappeared. A woman Claire had sold lilies to only 2 days before. She didn't notice the connection until she passed the shop window the next morning and saw a new doll on display. Its long black coat and dress matched perfectly the one the woman had worn the last time anyone had seen her. Uneasy, Claire searched for answers and found them in a drawer she'd never known was there. A ledger, her aunt's handwriting again, each page neatly titled "Orders, 3 at a time." Every set of 3 matched a date she remembered hearing whispered by locals, the anniversaries of other disappearances. The storm came on a Thursday night, wind rattling the shutters, lightning turning the shop's interior into brief, skeletal flashes. From the apartment upstairs, Claire thought she saw movement below, the faint tilt of a head, the glint of a glass eye catching the light. She crept down, each stair groaning under her weight until she could peer between the banister rails. The sisters were inside, their shawls damp from rain, gathered around a work table. They spoke in a tongue that felt older than the walls themselves, their hands quick and precise as they stitched long strands of dark hair into a porcelain scalp. The doll's tiny chest rose and fell, a whisper of breath escaping with each stitch. Claire's breath caught, and one of the sisters glanced up, not at her, but toward the window, where the shadow of a man passed by slowly, the scrape of a shovel cutting into wet soil. The sisters didn't break their rhythm. They told her, without looking up, that she had the hands for this work, that her aunt had known it, and so did they. They spoke of the unfinished as if they were children waiting to be born. They left her with the locked case and a bundle of tools, their footsteps fading into the storm. Claire's hands trembled as she lifted the last doll from the case. It was her face, her hair, her own unfinished self. The glass eyes blinked, the room lurched, the air gone thin, and suddenly her vision tunneled through 2 cold, curved panes. Her limbs felt stiff, unresponsive. She was no longer standing in the shop. She was in the doll, the world towering around her like a warped stage. Above her, massive fingers turned her gently, examining her porcelain skin. Her stomach sank. They were her fingers, her body. But the eyes that moved in that face were not her own. The thing wearing her skin threaded a silver needle and brought it closer, the tip glinting under the shop's single lamp. Claire tried to scream, but the sound was nothing more than a tiny crack of air from her unmoving lips. The needle lifted, and her stolen hands began to sew. The end, and yet you remain. Few ever reach this far. Prove it. Mark yourself in the comments, and I'll know who walks the night beside me. Until then, keep your lights low, your courage high, and meet me in the next story. The end.